Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. Today with us is Ryan Joswick. Ryan is CEO at RJA and is next Fortune 500 SVP. So RJA stands for Ryan Joswick Advisory. He's in the Spokane area and has a very cool background in business and sales, I see here. So Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you've been up to as of late.
Yeah, well, thanks. First off, appreciate the opportunity to jump on the podcast and chat. And so I, after spending 25 years predominantly building and growing sales teams in both Fortune 500 and venture capital-backed startups, started my own executive coaching and advisory. And went through a program that helped me evaluate what do I want to do with my life when I grow up. And that led to some really cool epiphanies and stepping out and opening up more freedom and autonomy to help serve other people. So that's what I'm doing.
Very cool. And why did you decide to start your own company and not stay in the lucrative Fortune 500 realm?
Yeah, and it's something that I wrestled candidly with for many years, like probably a lot of people do. And my mom's been was a nurse for 45 years. And we were hiking one time and I just said, hey, what were some of the biggest lessons you've had in life? And she's had a lot of people that have been on the deathbed and at their very final breaths and words before they pass away. And she says, I've seen a lot of people come and go from the world. And she goes, I'll tell you, when I have conversations with some of these elder people, the number one thing they have is regret, like enormous amount of weight and regret that they didn't take a risk. They didn't try something when they had the health, when they had the energy, and fear held them back often from doing it. And now they're at an age that they wish they would have spent more time with family, traveled, did the cool things, and they don't have the ability to do it. And that conversation really resonated with me, along with going through this program called Halftime, which is kind of like a football game where you halfway through a game, you stop and you look at the first half and you say, what went well? And what do we want to adjust for the second half? The difference was, Charles, this was for your life. So you would stop and you'd say, okay, what were my greatest accomplishments the first half of my life? What are my strengths? What are my passions? What's my purpose? What are my weaknesses? Where are areas that I've got regret or remorse? And then what adjustments do I want to make the second half of my life? And for so many years, I've developed, business plans, strategic plans, where to allocate capital and resources and people. But I never really took the time to create an actual personal, intentional life plan around what do I want to be the second half of my life. And that's what I did. And about halfway through that, I said, yeah, I'm going to take a step out of corporate and the safe, comfortable environment, and I'm going to go try something different. And had some great mentors and coaches around me to help challenge my thinking, and have always been an entrepreneur since I was a kid. So I was like, this is what I'm going to go do. So that's what kind of led up to it.
And describe the Fortune 500 experience. So there's some pros to it, but there's also lots of cons. Like it's quite bureaucratic and it's slow to make decisions most of the time. How did you live the experience yourself as a Fortune 500er?
Yeah, I'd say just like anything in life, there's pros and cons, right? And it's glass is half full or half empty, depending on how you look at it. The pros, is obviously you get safety, you get security. Depending on the organizations, you can get some great training. Some of the cons you references around the bureaucratic nature, the politics, and even sometimes processes are put in place. And people continue to run those processes even though it might not make sense anymore because the market's changed, technology, tech stack has changed, and it can be tough to make some of those changes when there's a hierarchy in place. And some of that it was maddening actually for a while, and because you can kind of see the writing on the wall, like there's a hole in a boat and the boat's going down and you're trying to say, hey, here's what you got to do. And they don't want to make changes. And so that, I just learned to try to focus on what I can control and focus on the good. And with that, I'm very grateful because I learned some incredible frameworks, some scalable processes through those companies we acquired and did a lot of M&A activity. So I got exposure to going in and doing, deal evaluations, how to do synergy cases, and then how to evaluate, how do we take the good and implement that into the organization? How do we leave the bad? And then how do you reallocate capital and people and resources? And there was a tremendous amount of experience I gained. And a couple of the organizations got rated one of the top organizations in the company to sell for by Selling Power, and some other pretty cool accolades that now have served me well in being able to go in and observe other organizations and say, hey, have you thought about this? And how are you doing that? And hey, I can notice something like this path you're going down. Here's what you might want to consider.
And you were VP of sales for various of these large organizations. So what were your favorite playbooks? And yeah, what specific playbooks would you have depending on the company, its size, its niche, et cetera? What is hot nowadays, in your opinion?
Yeah. And so many of the organizations I dealt with were service-based. So they did professional services. They were in the fintech space, which is credit card processing, payroll, HCM solutions, shorter sales cycle type of environment, serving mid-size market, mid-market, even some of the small mom and pop locations, but predominant large sales forces. So it started personally in sales back when I was in college, selling books door to door to pay for college, all the way up to leading large sales teams. At one point I had 600 person plus sales organization across the country that was responsible for net new accounts. And it's one of those things that it's not for the faint of heart. Like to go out and acquire new accounts. There's typically, you got the BDRs, SBRs, you got reps that can hunt. And then you also have the farmers that they want the leads, and they do a lot of lead flow. And so I've managed different types of sales reps in different organizations where some of them we provide leads, some of them we don't provide leads. The compensation varies by that. And, the reps that are able to go out and hunt and bring in their own net new accounts usually are going to get paid the most. And sometimes can be the higher maintenance to manage and lead because they know they're good at something. And there's a market demand for them. And so over that period of time, it's been amazing with the tech stack, right? The advancements in some of the technology, and the world you live in, right? Because obviously AI and all that stuff, like that is absolutely changing the landscape. And it's going to be I think it's going to look very different in 6, 12, 18 months from now. And some of those roles and functions are going to look very differently. And the individuals that learn to adapt and accept and use leverage that, and not just individuals, but organizations, because some organizations are fighting some of that stuff. And I think they're going to get left behind for organizations that can get a much higher ROI by leveraging technology versus in the past, people that used to do it, in person. Like, give you an example, Charles, like, a year ago, someone delivered a yellow book to my doorstep, and my kids were like, we got a book. And I'm like, yeah. And they're not really kids, they're all teenagers. And I'm like, it's a yellow book. They're like, well, what is it? And I'm like, what's a phone book? They're like, well, what's a phone book for? I'm like, well, you look up names and stuff. And I'm like, it's going to go in the recycling bin. They're like, well, why would they deliver it to our house? I said, well, let me talk about economics. You got these companies that are paying for advertising. They have to deliver X amount of books, but no one's using these books anymore. And so you have someone selling yellow page advertising that very well, if they don't adapt that technology, that position is going to go out. Just like some of the roles that I was in, some of those roles are advancing and over time.
And what would be the VP sales of the future? Would it be someone that's great at orchestrating an army of AI agents, someone that's really tech forward, someone that's really adaptable, but also has very high EQ, because the human part wouldn't disappear, the trust part wouldn't disappear? Would that be a good description of the future VP sales?
Yeah, I think you hit on it. I think the EQ is going to be a really, really big component, and maybe some of the AI stuff will continue to advance. Well, I think it will in that area, but there's still a gap in that. And so I think the roles that will continue to flourish are ones that involve human interaction, right? Maybe not as much of the tactical behind the scenes analytical type of stuff, but when it actually involves dealing with people escalation of whether it's customer or prospect issues, strategy. I think in-person type of meetings and events will become even more prominent and critical because of so much has been over video, and sometimes now it's tough to tell what's real and what's not real. So I think some of those roles within the VP of sales or senior vice president of sales, along with some of the strategy stuff, because the tactical, some of that will be taken over through technology, but still some of the strategy and the human interaction is definitely going to be some skill sets that people will want to develop.
Interesting. And yeah, tell me about the kind of advice you give to your clients nowadays, and what's the model you target, like fintech funded startups, right? How do you get to them? And yeah, what do you deliver when they hire you?
Yeah. So each engagement is a little bit different depending on what the situation, what phase of growth they're in, what series of funding they're in. And a lot of times founders have the passion, they have the excitement, they have the enthusiasm, they have a great idea, they get some funding, they build something that shows promise, maybe they get some additional funding on it. Then they get to a point where it's hard to continue to grow that without grinding harder. And the job gets to a point where there's not enough time in the day. That's why one of the books I love is E-Myth Revisited, right? People get into it because they have this passion, purpose, but then they realize they become a prisoner to this business because they don't have the systems and scalability. And so some of the things that I come in and help them do is identify how can they get a better ROI with their sales teams? Like how can they increase closing ratios, increase top of the funnel? Maybe it's attracting the right talent. Maybe it's finding out why the attrition's happening with some of those top salespeople or leaders that are leaving. And then it's how to most effectively build out the hierarchy for effective sales leadership and the right ratio to be able to do. And then some of the go-to-market strategy stuff around lead development, things like that. So every situation is a little bit different based on the type of industry they're in, the tenure of the organization, the size of the sales force that they have, the go-to-market strategy. Most of my business is all B2B. I've got some B2C experience, but most of it is in the B2B realm, shorter sales cycle, fintech, professional services. I was with an organization yesterday that they own franchises, and they had a full, but 15 people that flew in for a training and was able to sit in for 3 hours or so. Great people, but it was going through the sales process and talking about structure and sales scripts and objectives and methods. And that is very, very different than someone else I coach that is also in Mexico that oversees a technology company that sells predominantly remotely in the enterprise space. Both those situations have, I call them pebbles in their shoe, like problems and issues, but how we go about it and how we solve it is different from each other. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yes, it does. Do they come with you with problems, or do they come to you with like an optimization mindset? I just love my sales to grow, or they come with like, hey, this fire needs to be extinguished right now?
I would say a little bit of all of above. I think it depends on what phase they're in. Some of them, don't know what they don't know. Like they've been grinding away and they've been getting results and then now they're not getting results, would be some situations. Other ones would be someone who recently got promoted and, now they're overseeing a lot more responsibility than they've had. And they realize what got me here isn't going to get me to the next role. Maybe they were in a more tactical type of role, overseeing a smaller geography, and now they oversee a much larger geography, and it's a lot more strategy involved, and they have to evolve their thinking. And so that may come through a LinkedIn post, it come through a network, it come through a dialogue that I might have with someone around, a change or technology or forecasting challenges, and give them some ideas, some resources, some tools, and they say, oh, wow, that helped. Or, hey, I just had the best board meeting I've ever had. Really, really appreciate the coaching around reframing and setting the right narrative, how to tell the stories. And then they tell someone else and someone else gets referred in. So those would be some of the avenues.
And I guess the mindset part is also part of your specialty because you did an Ironman and overcame like a fear of like swimming yourself. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. And so it's actually a funny story. So for years I'd done marathons and got into those in 2002, ran my first one. And people say, well, why do you want to do that? I say, well, you get the health benefit, but there's this, and you know that because you've done endurance events, Charles, like there's this element of doing something that's hard. And when you build tenacity by doing hard things, you might not enjoy it in the moment. So I'd done marathons for years, and one of my buddies called up and said, hey, Ryan, hear me out. Before you say no, just hear me out. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And he goes, we should do an Ironman. And I was like, oh, and the first thing came to my mind going, I'm going to drown. Like, I'm going to drown in the water. And he says, it'll be amazing. We'll tell everyone we're going to do an Ironman. And I was like, oh, I've thought about doing it for years. He says, okay, let's do it. And I said, okay, let's do it. So we tell everyone we're going to do an Ironman. And we tell everyone we work with and our friends. And so my wife, a couple of weeks go by, and then a month goes by. My wife's like, well, maybe you should go try a small sprint triathlon. And at the time, we were living near Seattle, Washington. And there's this one in Issaquah, Washington in the end of May. And she says, you should go sign up. And I said, okay. So I called my buddy Eric. I said, hey, let's sign up for this sprint triathlon. And he's like, oh, I don't think I can. I don't know if it's going to work. And I said, well, let's do it. And he goes, well, let me talk with Lacey, my wife. And then she says yes, and we can do it. And so I call him. We hang up the phone. I call Lacey and said, hey, can you do this marathon or this triathlon? She says, yeah, no problem. Eric calls back later and says, oh, I can't do it. Lacey said no. I said, BS. I spoke with her. She said you can do it. He goes, oh, okay, we're going to do it. So I go on Craigslist. I buy a wetsuit. Never worn it before. Meet this guy in the mall parking lot. Buy it. We go down to the event that morning. Put the wetsuit on. It's super tight, like not the right size. And I'm walking down to the beach, and the rocks are super cold. Like, get in that water, and oh my God, it was so cold. Like, it was in the 40s because, it was in May in the Northwest. And I'm thinking the faster I swim, the sooner it'll be over. So I just start swimming as fast as I can. I come around that first corner, maybe 100 meters in, I'm out of air. And the wetsuit is suffocating me. I'm having my freak out phobia that I'm going to drown. I start backstroking. The support crew comes up in the kayak and they're like, are you okay? And I'm swallowing water. I come around the last corner and I see someone paddling, terrified. And it's my buddy Eric. And I'm like, backstroke. So he starts backstroking out into the lake. And the people are like, you're going the wrong way. And I go into the shore. I hit the shore. It was the longest 11 minutes of my life. So then we change our gear. We get on our bikes. We start riding and we're going down. It's a 14-mile bike ride. And we're about a third of the way in. And these guys come in all their decked out gear. And they're carbon fiber bikes. And they scream at us. Right. And my buddy's on his green bike with a sheepskin seat that he got from his grandfather that let him borrow the bike the day. And these guys scream, get out of the effing way. There's a race going on. And my buddy's like, we're in the race. We're part of the race. And so we finished the bike. We did the run. Well, it was a total defeating feeling because I thought, wow, I can't even do 400 meters. I'm supposed to swim 2.4 miles. And so I ended up hiring a coach who got in the pool, taught me how to swim, taught me how to breathe, and do it in open water using sights, because it's very different, as you know, swimming in a pool with a lane versus swimming in a lake where it's just murky and, watch out for a boat running you over. And spent a year training, doing that on the mental aspect of how to handle, the mind of running these past strategies and patterns of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna drown, and fear, and it ended up crossing the finish line in Penticton, Canada, and under 12 hours for full Ironman, and it was an incredible experience. So,
wow, yeah, the fear of drowning, I think, is quite common, and it's the number one thing we need to fight. Like when we start triathlons, is like all these people trying to get ahead, right, and sort of panicking because everyone's got that stressful energy. And yeah, the wetsuit thing is quite terrible. You need to buy the right wetsuit and cold water training, right? Like cold showers and cold baths and all of that. Because yeah, the mind is pretty good at signaling the worst case scenario, which could happen, by the way, right? But it's just in very low probabilities, probabilities of that happens like 1%. So yeah, it's interesting that you fought it. And there's also like the ego slash confidence thing. If like there's all these elite people telling you that you're bad, I think, or just like get out the way, that I think we all run our own races, right?
Yeah.
I've done like 15 minutes run that was as hard as 10-hour runs, right? Just because I had a bad stomach and I was feeling like shit that day. So I think we all run our own individual races. And I think it's the same with founders. Founders, they do panic a lot of time, right? Or salespeople, or I'm not going to meet my quota. I'm not going to meet my financial objectives. I'm going to go bankrupt. Everyone's going to laugh at me and so forth. But I think it's great to have a coach to just remind you to keep your cool, keep your eyes on the prize, right? Like the very next step, and not like overcomplicate things. I think a lot of people do that nowadays.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And a lot of, that's what I love about endurance activities is there's such a great correlation to business, because you get to that point where you want to give up, you want to quit, things aren't going well. And it's one more step. It's taking a big goal and breaking it into a very small chunk. The following year I went and did an ultra 50 miles on a mountain. Same thing. When you get past a marathon length, you're not thinking about, oh my God, when am I going to finish? You're thinking about, how do I get to the next mile? Like, that's it. Like, how do I get through the snow, over the stream? Like, just 1 mile. And so you break even business into small, incremental, achievable mile markers, I call them. And you got leading indicators. So maybe you don't see the big deals coming in, right? I coach leaders around. I say, look at the leading indicators. Are they doing the sales calls? Are they progressing the pipeline? Are they having the conversations? And then let's take a look at, those are leading indicators. Then let's take a look at what are the conversion ratios and closing ratios and average account sizes, and how can we get those up? But if they're just hammering them on things that, where's the deals, but not managing the pipeline, it's going back to the endurance activity. Okay, let's just focus on 1 mile. How do we create positive self-talk? And how do you encourage your reps to be able to perform within that day on what you need them to do? And sometimes we get in this fear mode of like, just more. And that's not always the case. It's a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of change in strategy, a little bit of different frameworks, and all of a sudden you get a 10x result.
Right. Yeah, I like that. And it's also just like you starting your own business, right? Like there must have been a little bit of panic there. Like, oh, I buy my own right now, and
yeah,
I'm not having that stable paycheck. Like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, and maybe I'm still managing it. I don't know if you ever like fully get over that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big adjustment going from a large environment where you've got a lot of support, a lot of staff, to sole entrepreneur where you've got to be resourceful. You've got to think through solutions, and you also have to prioritize, where do I want to actually spend my time, and have the discipline to go do the activities, because there's no one there saying you have to go do this. You can do nothing for the day. Yeah, and I'd say there's the roller coaster of emotions. I found getting myself plugged in with really good people and communities is important and key. So I can bounce ideas off and encourage each other and learn from. I mean, I've learned so much since I've been out. Like, don't get me wrong, I learned a lot in the corporate world and valuable stuff. But when you're out of that environment and you get exposed to different people and different ways of thinking and different tech stacks, the thinking exponentially goes up. Instead of thinking around managing something, it's around how do you find a solution? How do you find, overcome a problem or a challenge, especially when you're dealing with all these different types of leaders in different types of industries all over the world. You get on a call and it's around how do you ask the right question to uncover what the pain point is. And some days are great, and other days I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten into? But that's life. It goes back to how I started the conversation. My mom's, like, I don't want to be on my deathbed looking back and saying, yeah, I played it safe. I wasn't willing to let go of the comforter, the warm corporate blanket. And I wanted to like step out and try something. And if I get to the point where I don't enjoy it, then I go and get another job or do something else. Like, that's the beautiful thing with life, is we have options.
Yeah, I think that very few of us are built some certain way. I really think that you create yourself, that best version of yourself, right? Like Goggins preaches so well. Like, I think it's you look at yourself and the movie of you going through that triathlon, right? Like at first, and then to the full Ironman, and sort of punching through walls and getting through the next obstacle. And that's something to be very proud of. So thanks for coming on, Ryan. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah. So ryanjoswick.com is my website, and also on LinkedIn, you can find me. And if we're not connected, send me a note, and we'd love to connect and talk further and network and see how I can serve you.
So that was Ryan and Charles for another